Obrigada.
Bom dia a todos, é um prazer tê-los aqui. Um webinar dedicado a mais uma solução, mais um segmento de mercado dedicado a essa nova barreira dos mercados financeiros e de capitais, representado pelo link entre mercados e sustentabilidade. Não à toa, o nome desse grupo de trabalho do Laboratório de Inovação Financeira está em inglês. Isso é uma questão internacional. A competitividade do mercado brasileiro vai ser testada em bases internacionais, ou seja, não é algo que está ocorrendo longe disso, somente no Brasil, por óbvio. Inicialmente, assim, cabe brevemente contextualizar o trabalho. O Laboratório de Inovações Financeiras é um fórum multilateral. Periodicamente, estrutura grupos de trabalho para desenvolver estudos, soluções, produtos. Esse ano, um desses grupos de trabalho, o qual eu tenho o prazer de coordenar, ficou debruçado sobre as Sustainable Fintechs, mais especificamente com o interesse de mapeá-las no Brasil, conhecê-las, e por conhecê-las, significa conhecer quais são as questões que são mais relevantes para as suas atividades, o desenvolvimento de suas atividades, e quais as barreiras que eventualmente podem existir e previnem ou dificultam o crescimento desses produtos no Brasil. Com base nessas informações, o trabalho segue tendo resultado na pesquisa que será apresentada hoje, ou seja, hoje a gente terá a oportunidade de apresentar os principais achados a partir desse trabalho inicial. E o trabalho segue também por meio de uma troca desses findings, desses achados, com aquelas Sustainable Fintechs que nós identificamos e que poderão ser confrontadas com as principais conclusões que esse grupo de trabalho teve. Ao longo dos próximos meses, a gente fará isso, e no final de todo esse trabalho, o principal goal, na verdade, é conseguir ter um conjunto de recomendações, ou mesmo um plano de ação para desenvolver, ajudar a desenvolver de modo mais acelerado esse ecossistema no Brasil. Naturalmente, o Lab é um fórum multilateral, então ele representa o mercado, ou a economia, por assim dizer, ou a sociedade brasileira como um todo. Então, isso é uma questão relacionada, de fato, à competitividade do Brasil nos mercados financeiros. Esse link entre novas tecnologias financeiras, por assim dizer, né, sendo bem literal no conceito de fintech, e esse link representado, e seu link com o desenvolvimento sustentável do planeta. Portanto, sem mais delongas, feita essa introdução, e novamente agradecendo a presença de todos vocês, eu agora passo a bola para o Bruno Diniz. Bruno professor, articulista, empreendedor. Eu definiria o Bruno como um especialista em inovações no mercado financeiro. E, Bruno, o palco é seu.
Muito obrigado, Cláudio. Obrigado, pessoal do Lab, a audiência que está aqui ouvindo um pouco sobre esse tema. E como o Cláudio falou, né, nesse plano de fundo, nessa apresentação, a gente teve aí esse assunto como um dos assuntos foco, né, dos grupos de trabalho que foram criados. Na verdade, a gente já tem os grupos de trabalho, mas essa pauta específica ela foi aí colocada no ano passado. E aí, ao longo de cerca de um ano, a gente conseguiu desenvolver bastante essa temática, que é uma temática que está muito quente lá fora, né? A gente isso encontra totalmente com a pauta de ESG, né? Ou ASG aqui no Brasil. Então, a gente começa a ter um desenvolvimento, né? Já existem estudos orientando a discussão da Sustainable e das Green Fintechs lá fora, né? Que começaram a esquentar lá por volta de 2019, e a gente aqui, acho que encampado dentro do Lab, teve a chance de fazer com que esse assunto também, que é super demandado, pudesse ser abordado aqui dentro desse âmbito, tá? E aí eu vou botar para vocês, pessoal, uma apresentação para dar um pouco de colorido aqui no que tem sido feito ao longo desses vários meses aí, de um trabalho que várias pessoas estão envolvidas, pessoas do Lab. Eu tenho a oportunidade de estar envolvido juntamente com a Gabriela, que trabalha aqui, o Gabriel Porto, o próprio Claudio Maes, enfim, toda aí a equipe que trabalha diretamente no Lab, mas também vários e vários colaboradores que estão nessa, participando recorrentemente das reuniões e discutindo essa pauta. Tá? Então, pessoal, o que a gente tem? Antes disso, né, falar um pouco de agenda. Né, a gente teve a abertura agora do Cláudio. Agora eu vou falar um pouco sobre, eu juntamente com o Diego Perez, que provavelmente vai entrar em seguida aqui no nosso webinar. A gente vai discutir um pouco sobre o panorama nacional. Enfim, a gente teve frutos aí dessa discussão que foi originada no ano passado. Então, a gente vai falar desses findings e principais aí, né, conclusões que a gente conseguiu obter nesse estudo. E a gente tem a honra aí de 30 minutos de uma palestra do professor Thomas Puschmann, que é referência internacional no assunto, meu amigo também. Desde o começo, quando a gente começou com essas tratativas, eu fui buscar no trabalho que o Thomas está realizado lá fora, tanto na Universidade de Zurich, como dentro de um grupo chamado Green Fintech Network, e também com a Universidade de Stanford. Tem uma parceria entre a Universidade de Zurich e de Stanford, num think tank para fazer com que esse assunto seja fomentado também. Né? E a gente termina ali com 10 minutos de perguntas e respostas com a moderação do Cláudio, e a gente conta também com as perguntas de vocês. Tá? Bom, pessoal, para começar, né, a gente teve ali, né, basicamente esse grupo ele tem como objetivo, né, que foi mapear Sustainable Fintechs no país e seus principais entraves e, com isso, propor recomendações para fomentar esse ecossistema por aqui, viabilizando uma maior variedade de soluções relacionadas às finanças sustentáveis. Já existia um grupo também que já tratava de finanças verdes e tudo mais aqui dentro, mas atualizando isso para o que a gente está vivendo agora, a gente vê o mundo fintech se movendo nessa direção. Né? E aí pensamos que o entregável seria um diagnóstico sobre Sustainable Fintechs no país, né, seguido de recomendações para fomentar esse ecossistema por aqui. Né? Então, eu posso dizer que a gente dividiu o trabalho inteiro, né, nessa timeline, né, em basicamente 3 etapas. A primeira etapa, que é conceitualização e interlocução externa, né, que é um trabalho que, como eu falei, a gente teve a chance de mirar no que um grupo que foi instituído na Suíça chamado Green Fintech Network, que tem membros da academia, que tem membros do governo, reguladores e empreendedores que discutiram essa pauta e levaram para o governo, para os reguladores e para as partes interessadas o que seriam as proposições ali para poder ajudar a fomentar esse ambiente. Né? Então, a gente foi atrás do Green Fintech Network, trabalhando principalmente também em definição técnica, porque a taxonomia ainda está sendo criada nesse momento que a gente fala. Num segundo momento, a gente fez um mapeamento das fintechs sustentáveis no Brasil, com a ajuda também da ABFintechs, né, que tem uma base larga aí de associados, e eles enviaram essa pesquisa para vários players. Foi uma pesquisa autodeclaratória, então eles mandam, já tinha a perguntinha que selecionava com base na nossa definição que a gente formatou, né, olhando os cases internacionais, a gente colocava isso. Se a startup sentia que não se enquadrava naquilo, ela já recebia o nosso obrigado. Caso contrário, ela tinha outras perguntas que levou a gente às conclusões aqui. Né? E aí a gente teve a aplicação, a criação da pesquisa, levantamento da conversa com eles, né? E aplicamos isso e publicamos essa pesquisa recentemente. Né? Então, assim, esse é o ponto que a gente está. E o terceiro estágio agora, que é o que a gente começa a inaugurar a partir dessa discussão, depois desse webinar, é a interlocução, de fato, com essas Sustainable Fintechs, para entender quais são as dores, o que elas reivindicam, muito na linha do que foi feito no Green Fintech Network, que é a nossa referência também. Né? E acabando esse trabalho como um todo, né, pelo menos essa primeira parte desse trabalho como um todo, a gente tem em junho aí uma lista inicial de recomendações baseado muito nesse trabalho internacional que a gente já citou aqui do Green Fintech Network e adequado à realidade do que é necessário para os players que atuam no mercado por aqui. Tá? Bom, a gente teve olhando muito a questão da taxonomia, a gente olhou lá para fora e a gente acabou aqui traduzindo, aqui, trazendo para o português o que são as fintechs sustentáveis, né? Então, a gente está falando aí de fintechs sustentáveis, são negócios que utilizam tecnologias digitais para prover soluções relacionadas às finanças sustentáveis, que é esse texto, né, essa chamada aí, foi adaptado do material da Green Fintech Network. E aí a gente fala também que o que exemplifica um pouco mais sobre tecnologias digitais, em caráter exemplificativo, são tecnologias aplicadas nas áreas de dados e automação, e a gente tem uma lista de tecnologias nesse sentido, tecnologias móveis, e também entrando na parte de novas fronteiras como blockchain e internet das coisas, e finanças sustentáveis, né? A gente tem essa interseção desses dois mundos, né? Que também pegamos ali na questão para contextualizar a definição utilizada pelo G20 Sustainable Finance Study Group, lá de 2018, né? Então, colocando que financiamento, bem como arranjos institucionais de mercados relacionados que contribuam para a realização de um crescimento forte, sustentável, equilibrado e inclusivo, por meio do apoio direto e indireto às estruturas dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, do ODS. Então, a gente tem, esse é o pacote do que a gente conseguiu de conceitualização, é um trabalho de estudo, é uma área recente, nova, existem poucos materiais, e alguns dos poucos materiais publicados, inclusive em literatura internacional, alguns deles têm envolvimento do Thomas Puschmann, do professor, que vai poder falar com a gente aqui na sequência, tá? E aí, pessoal, nesse primeiro levantamento, conceitualização, e aí a gente fez também essa pesquisa, aplicamos a pesquisa, a gente chegou em alguns destaques, né? A gente teve aí, um segmento ainda bem novo, né? E a gente sente muito orgulho aí de estar conseguindo puxar as primeiras informações a respeito deles. A gente teve 33 respondentes dessa pesquisa, como eu coloquei, que são autodeclaratórios, né? E aí a gente tem alguns destaques, né? Então, o primeiro deles é a questão da fundação, a maioria deles é fundação recente, após 2017, né? E eles estão em estágio de negócio nas fases de implementação comercial e escala. Então, quando a gente olha até na realidade europeia, esse assunto de Green Fintech, Sustainable Fintechs, começou a ficar mais forte em 2019, né? Então, a gente tem ali, pelo menos assim, a discussão em torno disso, mas encaixa muito ali com a data de fundação das companhias até lá fora, né? A maioria delas atuam em empréstimos, créditos e financiamentos, meios de pagamento crowdfunding, mas bem diversas nas áreas de atividade de cada uma. Uma a cada 3 se autodeclarou uma agrofintech, ou agrifintech, ou agfintech. A gente tem 3 jeitos de falar isso. Então, isso é uma coisa que só, de fato, acontece no Brasil. Olhando a realidade suíça, a gente não tem isso, né? Até mesmo pela nossa vocação agrária, que a gente acaba tendo esse fit maior de fintechs do agro, que também estão ali dedicadas no pilar da sustentabilidade, né? Por exemplo, enquanto isso, né, a gente olhando lá na realidade suíça, a gente tem mais players voltados para seguros. As principais tecnologias utilizadas são desde a implementação de APIs, plataformas de digitalização, automação e robótica, e ainda pouco utilizado blockchain e DLT. E principais desafios e gargalos que eles apontaram foi a atração de recursos financeiros e investidores e a atração de clientes. Eu entendo que o termo, as iniciativas ESG estão muito em evidência, mas eu acho que um papel até mesmo desse trabalho todo é dar um empurrão para tentar ajudar a solucionar isso, conectando com as pessoas certas, talvez, né? Então, estamos nessa lida. E a gente tem aí 1 em cada 3 dessas empresas, né? Elas... um segundinho aqui. 1 em cada 3 dessas empresas utilizam um arcabouço ASG, né? Então, referências, padronizações, informações e dados. Ou seja, muitas delas estão alinhadas, mas não tem conhecimento também dos frameworks de trabalho. Então, a gente também tem esse trabalho aqui de fazer isso se propagar no nosso ecossistema, né? Próximos passos, pessoal, antes de eu passar a bola aqui para o Diego, a gente tem entrevistas em profundidade com parte das fintechs sustentáveis identificadas. A gente vai fazer isso aqui mais para o meio de maio, né? Já começamos algumas entrevistas, mas a gente vai acelerar mais agora no próximo mês. Depois disso, realizar uma mesa redonda com as fintechs sustentáveis para debater e validar as recomendações, né, que elas vão colocar nessas entrevistas também, corroborando com o que já foi colocado no material, né, que também está disponível para download, tá, pessoal? Depois a gente vai passar esse link para vocês. E a finalização do conjunto inicial de recomendações para fomentar esse ecossistema no país. Então, o grande ponto aqui que a gente quer chegar, né, como tangibilidade desse assunto. Perguntaram o que é DLT, né? DLT é também a tecnologia ali de Distributed Ledger Technology, né? A tecnologia muito similar aí ao blockchain, né? De, como eu diria, livro-caixa distribuído, né? A gente tem que as pessoas que falam blockchain, elas têm uma certa rixa de falar que blockchain é blockchain, DLT é DLT, mais com funções de privacidade. Mas é basicamente isso. Bom, pessoal, passo aqui agora. O Diego, não sei se ele está por aqui já ou não. Gabi, você me diz aí?
Não, Bruno, o Diego
Teve um imprevisto?
Teve um pequeno imprevisto. A gente está mudando um pouquinho aqui a ordem do webinar, portanto. Agora eu vou passar a palavra para o professor Thomas e, portanto, avisando ao público que a gente vai passar para o inglês. O professor Thomas, infelizmente, não domina essa língua tão global como o português. Now we are very pleased to invite Professor Thomas to join us. Professor Thomas, as Bruno said in his presentation, is he's a leader of about the discussion of this matter at a worldwide comprehensive view. He has been researching and studying this kind of solution for a long time, and now is member of a partnership between the University of Zurich and Stanford. So we are very excited, and it's an honor for us to have him here. And we are expecting from Professor a global overview about this matter, sustainability and fintechs. Please, Professor, the stage is yours.
Oops, sorry for that. That was the wrong one. Yeah, thank you very much for your kind introduction, Claudio. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, as been said, the topic of sustainable digital finance or sustainable fintech, or however you term it, has been evolving over the past few years. It's a relatively new and exciting development that we can see, and maybe have me give you an overview what I have planned for the presentation now. So first, what is sustainable digital finance? What's it all about? Then what is Switzerland's agenda on this topic? I think it's also interesting because Switzerland was among the first movers in that field to come up with a more concrete action plan of what they want to do. And as we were tightly involved from our center's view, I can share a little bit more of insights of what we have done and what the plans are. And then what are the future avenues for innovation that we currently see? So let's start with the first, maybe. I think everybody's clear about sustainability in a broader context. So the sustainable development goals that were defined by the United Nations are more or less the framework that we are talking about. And they require significant investments of at least approximately 5 to 7 trillion US dollars per year globally. So that's a tremendous amount of money. And if you think of, for example, the climate issue alone, then it becomes very clear that one of the major levers for achieving this and for redirecting the money in the right ways is that the financial system plays really a major role here. So, for example, the global fuel reserves, as we know it today, contain about 2,860 gigatons of carbon. of which around 1,500 gigatons are in the balance sheets of listed companies as assets. So, however, the remaining emissions budget that we have in order to achieve the 2-degree climate goal is only around 900 gigatons by 2050. So it becomes obvious that this is a little bit more than half of what we can burn in terms of fossil fuels, with only around 75 gigatons remaining for the second half of the century. If we count as of the status quo. So this is a substantial carbon risk for investors and also for asset owners, which is often termed as the carbon bubble. So there is a carbon bubble around, which is also called stranded assets or transformation risk. And the climate issue alone is probably one of the biggest that we currently have with regard to the mentioned 5 to 7 trillion. There are other things included in that as well, but this is probably the most pressing issue that we currently have. And we think that technologies like fintech and others can really foster sustainability by providing novel business models, novel products and services. And we think that it will be one of the most relevant technology domain as part of the financial sector, at least, for the coming decades. Technology itself is probably the most important part of the puzzle when it comes to the transformation that we are currently in. So that's the context, what we are talking about. And sustainable digital finance is about connecting all these dots. So sustainability, about the sustainable development goals, then the financial system and the technology, which is all about digitalization in the financial sector. So we heard about fintech now for more than a decade. And I still remember that conference that I had the honor to attend in Brazil, which was also about fintech and its future avenues. And we talked about the challenges and the innovation potentials. And it was really a very interesting discussion there. This now leads us on the connection of these dots with sustainability, which is the second core driver this transformation in the financial sector. So there are many examples around, and I will come to some of them in the next slide. So, for example, in Switzerland, we have collected and mapped the sustainable fintech ecosystem and identified by last year 28 fintech startups. If you look at the total number of fintech startups in Switzerland, which is almost around 400, then it becomes also clear that this is a very small part, a very small fraction of the total number of startups that we have here in Switzerland. So it's still at a very pre-mature stage, which we expect to grow. So the number already increased to like 10 or 20 more. So we will update this map by this year and then see how this developed. So there are some examples in it. For example, Yova, which is in the investment management category, which you can see is the most prominent and dominant one here in Switzerland. That's obvious because Switzerland is the biggest hub for investment management in the world when it comes to offshore capital. Of course, then this domain is very strong. Yova, for example, is an example for a robot advisor, which allows investments in sustainability focused firms. So they only allow you to do investments in firms that are really or that have proven to be sustainable. Another example when it comes to insurance, and you can see that this is the besides deposit and lending, which is the most weakest part here. So it only has two representatives at the moment. RepRisk, for example, runs the world's largest daily updated database on ESG risks. And they have a track record of more than 15 years of unbroken data history. So they can really show you or connect you to sustainability data of firms, what they have found with technologies like machine learning in all the databases that are around, that are publicly available in the media, and also that is available only in certain languages. So they collect all these data, I think in more than 100 languages or more, covering also Chinese and others. And let you really drill down and prove whether a firm is really sustainable or not and is compliant to the ESG data. So these are just two examples of an ecosystem that is currently emerging here in Switzerland. And there are, of course, a lot more. For example, we collected a few months ago. No, that was already by the beginning of last year. We did a more global analysis of the fintech startups. So this was a sample of 126 sustainable fintechs from around the world, and we analyzed them in terms of their strategic orientation, their organizational setup, and their technologies that they use, and also in terms of the sustainable development goals that they are aiming for. What we found is, and all the more, let's say, surprising stuff is circled in red here. Most of them are, from a business model perspective, focused on operational efficiency. So the examples that I gave you, like delivering and providing data about ESG risks, for example, to financial incumbent firms or to other firms, is something that most of these startups currently focusing on. Really some rare examples are focused on new customer-oriented models or on new products and services, like 7 or 4% of them. Most of them are also focusing more on the business-to-business domain. So business services are really in the scope, as you can see, like 82% of them. This is also reflected in the stakeholder interaction. So this number corresponds here with business to business interaction here. So there's not so much a strong focus on government related services, which is surprising because all the sustainable development goals are very much connected also to government related services. So there's not much around here. Also, when it comes to consumer-related services, there is room for improvement, as you can see. From a business process perspective, we saw that most of them are either focused on financing, trading, or investments. There's only less in the insurance domain, as I said, also less in the payments domain, which is surprising because the payments domain, for example, would also have lots of potentials. There are nice examples around from startups like Docomi, which is a startup that allows you to analyze the carbon footprint of consumers by their spending behavior, and analyzing the transaction data of payments, by which you can then maybe also improve your spending behavior by saying, well, you should probably maybe buy certain products or services maybe from another firm, as they are more sustainable or have a better carbon footprint. So these are examples there. And also from the insurance domain, the example from RepRisk that I mentioned previously also offers a lot of examples here. Also with regard to, there are many examples around in the insurance domain. like crop insurances for farmers, for example, in the agricultural domain, or others. When it comes to the technologies, most of them, 85%, were in the blockchain space. Well, that is not surprising because the last 2 or 3 years were really, everything was about blockchain. We missed a little bit other technologies like AI and so on, which also would allow for really nice use cases. I think this will be probably part of later developments here. This is also the reason why the application design in most cases is decentralized with 83%. So most of the SDGs that were in focus, and that's the last observation, are in the climate domain. So it's 7, 9, and 11, as you can see. Environmental sustainability combined with economic sustainability. So these were the two most regarded ones. And there is a little bit of something in the social sustainability domain with SDG number 7. So these were the findings in a brief overview. There is a paper on that, which you can also find online. It's called Developing a Taxonomy for Sustainable Digital Finance. And there you can find more information about that. Then what is Switzerland's agenda? Maybe this is also something of interest for you. We've developed an action plan with some action points here. First was foster access to data. So there were 3 action items here: establish an international sustainability data platform, which is not easy, I must say. Switzerland is in a good position there because there are many NGO organizations here like the United Nations, OECD, and others. So there is a strong case for that, but still it's a long way. Continually ensure access to global sustainability data sets, especially for the Swiss actors. This was something that the Swiss government wants to ensure. And third, improve sustainability disclosures from companies. This is something that was already now regulated in Switzerland. So the big corporations now have to disclose their ESG data in order to provide databases for the regulator and also for financial services firms. So there is already a green mark behind that. This is also true for the 4th point, which is part of the Cultivate New Startups action plan. Establish an annual innovation challenge for green fintechs, which is part of our action items that we have as part of our center. That's an annual theme that we have written and also published. So everybody is invited there to show their cases. We also work on the dedicated accelerator tracks. There is already one going on here in Switzerland, a smaller one from F10. There are others that will follow, more bigger ones. And there is also the idea to leverage the Swiss bill, which was passed last year on DLT, in order to also foster sustainable fintechs here. Promote access to clients is the 3rd field of action. Lead the world in green open finance. That's a more long-term goal. Establish a Swiss green fintech map. You have already seen that. We have established that and will update that on a regular basis. Convene a coalition of the willing. We have already done that. There is regular meetings of it's not kind of a task force, but it's a kind of an association that we want to build, and all these people meet on a regular basis. So that's something we already have done. Ease access to capital. This is also more of a long-term idea. There are ideas around also to have a public-private fund fueled with money from investors from both sides that also invest in green and sustainable fintechs. So this is something that Switzerland works on. Also, the flexibility to invest in such startups from pension funds, for example. There are some countries in the world that already do that. Switzerland is not among them yet, but this shall be possible in the near future. And fifth, but not least, boost the ecosystem and innovation landscape. So things like funding agencies from the scientific community. There's InnoSwiss, for example. Then master classes and global exchanges on that topic. So we have already done a few of them, but not all of them. So this is, you can also read that. There is a paper on that. It's called the Green FinTech Action Plan that you can find officially published by the Swiss government on the website. It's downloadable and you can read it there. What are future avenues for innovation? So that's my last point for now. And that's also the last slide for it. So we see with regard to the taxonomy, I showed you strategy, organization, and technology, these three fields. There is first novel cross-industry digital ecosystems that we can see merging. Well, if you think of the financial sector that was already for always involved in the real economy, it's obvious that also sustainable fintechs have to work with the real economy very closely. So the examples that we went through, like data startups that deliver and provide data for ESG metrics, for example, these are very strong examples as value chains and supply chains are very intransparent. I think that's really a no-brainer here. The number of products and services, as said, very much is on the operational efficiency side. We haven't seen so much on new customer interaction models or new products and services. Really strongly focusing on sustainable fintech. That is something that we think will also become more stronger in the near future. Then there is this idea from autonomous distributed organizations, the so-called DAOs, that you have probably also heard of. So there is this idea, and that connects strongly with the idea of the commons that we had in the past, for which already a Nobel Prize was given. So how can you ensure that things like the environment or water, more specifically, or land becomes protected if many other people are involved? So there was this example of the commons in Switzerland, where several farmers used land jointly to let their cows out there and feed their cows. But nobody could overuse it, because if he or she would have overused it, then the other farmer wouldn't have enough food for his or her cows. So maybe there's a possibility here also to use technology to achieve the same in a more global context. And that's why we think that blockchain usage for the commons, for the common goods, might be an idea if it is governed also more democratically by these DAOs, by these distributed autonomous organizations, where everybody has an equal vote. And there's not a strong state or country that has more vote because it's more economically powered than another one. So there might be a role for that novel organizational designs also in this field. This relates strongly to the governance mechanisms that are, of course, coupled with that, but also has an impact in the regulation field. If you think also of auditing models, think of blockchains that are used in supply chains that are more transparent, that you can also more easily audit here, and you can be sure that the data that is included can be referred as true in a sense. And there is one nice example. So if you connect supply chain data, for example, to satellite data, you can then prove that forest, for example, is still there, or that a specific piece of land in a certain country is not polluted. So all these linkage of data and supply chains, value chains with auditing models, I think is also something we haven't seen yet. Last but not least, technology, of course. All this is enabling organizational and strategic models. So there will be not only new technologies, but the convergence of all these technologies like blockchain and AI, I think is a strong enabler for new models in certain fields. Quantum computing is just around the corner. So this will also allow for new models and for novel fields. And when we look at data and integration, there is also something developing here. If you think of blockchains again, this is a field where we are like back in the 80s, 90s, where the early web was developed. So the Web 3 is currently a term that is coined. And it's probably the same situation as 20, 30 years ago, as we were as we are now with the Web 3, where all these protocols are developed, smart contract frameworks are developed, and with this and with the connections of all these new on-chain and off-chain data, I think there are strong cases also for new applications here. Oracles, for example, where you can feed off-chain data into blockchains, forth and back, and many others. So this layered stack of architecture is something that is currently emerging, and the combination with other technologies like quantum computing and AI then allows for really novel ways of doing, of designing sustainable fintech solutions. Yeah, so that's it. Just leaves me a remark for the Global Sustainable Digital Finance Forum, which we will hold on, or is at least is planned for September 30th. And we will most probably also stream that online. So you are invited to attend this. And I thank you very much for your attention and look forward for the discussion.
Perfect. Claudio, please.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Professor Thomas. It was very useful for us in order to understand how a more mature ecosystem is developing. And also, especially the action plan will support our next step, certainly, because it's a kind of roadmap or a beginning of a roadmap in order to develop this ecosystem also here in Brazil. And given your presentation, I'd like to ask Bruno if he wants to make some link between the current situation in Brazil and your works.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Professor Thomas. I think it was very interesting. It's interesting because here in Brazil, we're just like in the beginning of this journey of mapping out the ecosystem and trying to understand. There was a question that was sent for us now, asking about, because we had 33 respondents on the survey. For example, there are some clear green and sustainable fintechs that receive it, but somehow didn't have the chance to respond it. So we're talking about 33 self-declaratory responses on that. We still need like more movements here to map out in a very complete and comprehensive way this sector. But we're just now taking our baby steps here, and I think it's like the beginning. But I would like to understand a little bit, because we have definitely some contrasts. One of the findings that I said here is, out of the companies that responded, like 11 of them, so 30 of them are related to ag fintechs. So we're talking about ag fintechs that operate in the agriculture field. So that's a different aspect that I would say. I heard you saying about there are some, for example, insurance companies that are heavily focused on protection of crops and insuring crops and things like that. So, and I'm pretty sure that you're also mapping other parts of the world. You have this project with this University of Zurich along with the University of Stanford. So if you could like say a few things about this project, that you guys with Zurich and Stanford are doing together. And also if you already heard about other specific characteristics of green and sustainable fintechs in other parts of the world or out of Switzerland, at least.
Okay, so the let me come to the first question. So the project with Stanford is a new center that we are planning in a joint effort. It's called the Global Center for Sustainable Digital Finance, and that is planned to be launched in well, we are heading this up in the second half now of this year, and shall be operational by 2023 then. And the idea is really to dive deeper into all of these domains that we currently talked about. That's at least the idea that we have, and there is the possibility also for industry partners to join the initiative. And some of the things we are planning is there will be a global database of all of the startups that we currently see. So there is a global mapping exercise that we have on the way. There will also, among more research and educational opportunities, there will be an accelerator program and also a venturing fund for startups in that field. So there are many activities planned that are not only focused on academic things, but also that allows us to connect with the industry. So that's the plan for that. And for the second question, what we have seen outside in the world on other cases, well, it's interesting. So there are, besides the sole focus on the financial services, where we have seen this taxonomy, like on investments and lending and insurance and so on, there are strong connections to other industries as well, as you said, to the agricultural sector, for example. But this was nothing that was very strong, I must say. I understand that this is a very strong need for Brazil, obviously. But what we have seen is especially the energy sector that was very strongly connected. Because it is, of course, responsible for more than 70% of all the greenhouse gas emissions that we can see. And of course, it has a huge impact there. And the examples for that were electric vehicle charging possibilities where you need payment platforms, for example, or marketplaces that directly connect companies with green energy producers. Or energy trading platforms that allow selling and buying of renewable energy. So there is always a financial component in them, a tech and finance component. But in that case, it's very strongly connected for the or to the energy sector. Another one is the transportation sector. Of course, it's also a very strong carbon emitter. And there are also very nice cases there. And a third one was, as we have seen, there are almost no cases here around, is the government sector. And I think this is one that will come over the next few years. Especially entrepreneurship and investing, for example, here, microfinance platforms, for example, or other things that are connected to the common goods. The example that I brought in the end, or also financial inclusion is a very strong enabler here. I think if you think of central bank digital currencies that we are also talking about at the moment, and the possibility to link them with a purpose, for example. So waste management is something which in large cities is a real big problem also in all parts of the world, be it in South America or in Asia. If you can incentivize people with using or getting money, for example, when they put their waste to where it belongs to and not on the street, can be easily done with such CBDC models. So these are just some examples, and that's what we saw. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, you said one sector that, because we're just in the beginning of the exploratory studies on that. But I already wrote an article about that, pointing out this that you mentioned about the energy sector. Here in Brazil, we have some, right? I wouldn't say many, but we have some fintechs that are gaining traction, and they are mainly focused on financing like solar energy, like for infrastructure for SMEs or even for individuals. So I would include that on that box. But the thing is, sometimes they receive that and they don't feel like they are, or somehow it's just like the concept is still need like a little bit more of, I would say propaganda or I think in fact it need to be worked more in by the academia, by the lab, the one that we are here doing this project. And I think that there are so much things to be done on this field. Claudio, please.
Yes, there's a question from Luciano Gorgulho, our colleague in lab, and the question is to the professor. And Luciana wanna knows if there is any experience of a fintech dedicated to provide collaterals to social impact business. If the professor knows some example about that.
I'm not sure whether I got that. So if there is a fintech that has collaterals, or?
No, dedicated to provide collaterals to social impact businesses.
Okay, so ones that are focusing more on the social impact side. Well, there are not so many as mentioned. So most are really focusing on the environmental sustainable development goals. That's clear, because climate change is something that is pressing at the moment. Especially the ones, well, there is one hot field, I would say, where these data firms are currently working on, and which allows then investors and financial institutions to evaluate sustainability risks more comprehensively and more globally. I think those ones are probably really the ones that cover all of them, all of the sustainable development goals. All the others are really focusing more on niches. Okay. That's what we are seeing. Yeah.
I have a question also, because I like a lot the idea of viewing this market as a kind of interaction between digital finance and sustainability. But digital and finance are very common and well accepted concepts. But sustainability is a bit more complicated than that, because there is not, or I don't know yet, a winner taxonomy regarding what is sustainability for financial purposes. And if it's possible, I'd like to know if you, professor, has some, if you know if there is some kind of consensus being achieved regarding this issue on a global scale, because at the end of the day, we will have to work on a global framework, and the taxonomy of sustainability will have to be only one for all markets. So is there any winner consensus being achieved regarding this issue? Do you know something about that?
There are different activities around. The maybe the most comprehensive one that currently is on the market is the European Union taxonomy for sustainable finance, that specifically is focused on sustainable finance issues. I think that one is probably one of the most comprehensive ones. There are others around that approach it from different directions. Disclosure frameworks, or data frameworks. There were also attempts on the G20 level, I think, to achieve some common understanding of that. But as far as I know, it's not something that has emerged so far. So there is no global standard, let's say, for that. And if you look back in history, also when it comes to finance, where there are only certain rare standards that are really globally accepted. And I'm not sure whether we will see something like that in the near future.
Okay, thanks a lot for your answer.
Perfect. Claudio, please.
No.
So we're reaching the end of the transmission here, Professor. I would like to thank you very much. I think we definitely have more discussions around that. I think as and we are available to contribute on your findings around that. So please reach us out whenever you need. And I think that there are a lot to be done in Brazil, of course, because of everything that it represents in the sustainability field. It's going to be something big here, and we really want that to flourish. So let's try to do our best on that. I don't know if you have some final words, and then I get back to Portuguese and try to make like a very short wrap up of it. But anyways, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person soon. So as soon as this is possible again. Thanks very much for the invitation here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Switching back to Portuguese now. Então, Cláudio, se você tem também algumas palavras finais aqui para a gente fazer um wrap-up sobre isso, a gente faz um bate-bola aqui e a gente já pode finalizar.
Eu acho que tudo que foi falado pelo professor Thomas colabora para a tese de que nós temos uma oportunidade para o mercado brasileiro aqui, no que se refere a explorar esse segmento de mercado, inclusive sendo competitivos em termos de atração de capital internacional, né? Sendo competitivos numa escala global. Agradecer a todos, a presença de todos aqui novamente, deixar registrado que, infelizmente, o Diego Perez, dessa vez, teve imprevistos, não pôde apresentar a visão da ABFintechs, mas que isso, certamente, no futuro, teremos nova oportunidade para fazer. É isso. Uma boa manhã a todos. Good evening, professor. And bye-bye.
Ok.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Até mais, pessoal. Tchau, tchau.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.